Hi, everybody. This is Donna Reed. I traveled and up with people in 1976. Pretty sure if you've watched any of these, you already know that, and you might be tired of hearing it. I am in Tucson, Arizona, sitting in my actual real work office today. And my guest today is Michael Bowerman. Welcome. And I got to tell you, he's one of those people that I know his name and I know nothing about him. So today is going to be really interesting for me, Michael. So why don't you start by telling everybody maybe how you learned about Up With People, if it was by seeing a show and when that was and when you joined.
Um, I saw a few shows when I was young. Excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, I'm originally from the town of Joplin, Missouri, in the United States, and that was a pretty popular Up With People spot that they would come every 4 years or so. And so we saw them about 3 times when I was young. Um, just saw them,
Okay.
and how I came to travel is an interesting story. The person who was the major sponsor whenever they came to Joplin was my father's best friend, who he worked at the TV station. So
Oh,
whenever they came to town, the TV station would sponsor them. So my father was having lunch with his friend, and Up With People had just recently called him to see if they could come back in the near future. And my father's friend mentioned to my father, hey, I think Mike would be good for Up With People. So when my father came home from work that day, I was in high school. My father, who was notoriously funny in subtle ways, goes, I've decided you're not going to go to college next year.
oh,
And I'm like, what? And then I had to go, what did I do? And so finally he goes, what do you think about Up With People? And I had never even thought about it for myself.
wow.
Um, I hadn't thought about college either. To be honest, I hadn't made any thought. I was just getting to graduation, and then it was going to be, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So we called the Tucson office, found out where the closest show was, because back in those days, you didn't interview at the show.
Right.
So at the end of my school year, like in May, um, there was an Up With People show about an hour away. I
Okay.
was in a performing group in my high school. We sang at nursing homes and things like that. So we had a show that night. So I sang, and we bolted from the nursing home to drive the hour to see the show. I got there late. I missed most of the show, actually.
Wow.
I walked in on Moonrider. So I walked in,
Yeah, you
I
really
walked
did.
in I walked in on Moonrider, heard the last couple of minutes of the show, and then they said, if anyone would like to interview, please come down and see some people at the front of the stage. So I went down and talked with someone in the cast, actually came out and played the piano for someone as well before they struck the piano.
Okay.
And then we drove an hour home
Wow.
and
Okay, where did
didn't
you go? Where'd you go in Missouri to see the show? What town did you go to?
Springfield, Missouri.
Springfield. Okay. Okay.
Springfield would have been May May of 1981.
81. Okay.
So,
Okay.
um, and I got an acceptance letter from signed by Chris Abusi
Uh,
on the day of graduation. So literally,
oh, wow.
I had my robe on. I had my robe on when I read my acceptance letter.
Well, that's cool.
So it was a really cool experience for me.
Nice. Okay.
So
Did you then, had you, when you played the piano, then were they asking you to come and play piano when you were going to travel?
no, they said, if you're interested, and I wasn't that interested really.
Okay.
Um, so I just went to sing. I like to sing and dance,
Okay.
and but I ended up playing in the band.
Mhm.
As things go, things change. It never stays the same and Up With People. So um, I was on the road, and Bill Welsh came out to visit the cast, and he said, I heard that you play trumpet. And I told him, well, I haven't played in like since my freshman year of high school. So I was never very good then. So he asked me if I would be willing to possibly learn and be a backup and play some of the shows. And I said, I would be willing to do that. So I hadn't played trumpet because of mouth surgery in 3 years.
Oh my.
Plus, I had picked up the tuba my senior year of high school.
Wow.
So my mouth muscles had
The
completely
embouchure.
changed. So I
Yeah.
wasn't sure how well I would do. So my cast, which was Cast C, 1981, we
Okay.
were lucky enough we left Tucson in August, and in September we uh, performed a show in conjunction with the Denver Symphony here in Denver.
Okay.
My parents drove out from Missouri to see the show. They loved the fact that I was Up with People. So they came to see the show, brought my trumpet with them.
Ah.
So I started picking up the trumpet again in September, learning the show, and I played my first full show on second trumpet. I never was the first trumpet. I played my first full show on Halloween night.
Oh,
So
wow.
it took me about a month to learn and memorize the second trumpet parts. So we had three trumpets, and on occasion all three of us played. Usually it meant one of them could sit out. The second trumpet player learned the first parts.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
because that was beyond me.
I
So it was a great experience.
I think we had three trumpet players too. It's interesting to just think back and think how many different instrumentalists we had in our show. So, I was like the end of the bicentennial, and we did that Yugoslavia song Farmhouse, I think, and there was a melodica in that. And that was like my big part. If I played an instrument, it was a melodica. And then because I had played French horn, so when you talk about embouchure, I think about that. I started on cornet, went to French horn, but every once in a while I would play trombone in the show, just like for one or two songs, because it wasn't that much different than a trumpet part, and I could make those little. That's funny. You just saying that just reminded me of that. I haven't thought about that for years.
Yeah, actually, that you Farmhouse is a strange song in my Up with People history.
Oh,
It wasn't a very popular song. It's a good song, but it's not one of those popular ones. But to this day, I still remember the lyrics and the melody. I don't know why.
I think
Of
it's just
all
unique.
of all songs in the show, that
Yeah.
when I was 10 years old, I saw a show and I can still remember the
Yeah,
lyrics of the chorus to this day.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's always been an interesting song for me in my Up with People history. So
There are some of those that are more minor keys, more melodic, less energetic. The one about Kosovo that Paul wrote, years
mhm.
later, they're not happy, upbeat songs, but they're great stories. And I think that's the way
Yep.
that's the way that song was to me
Yep.
a little bit. And frankly, for everybody on stage, right? It was a minute to pause in between all.
Let's rest.
Let's rest for a minute, like when somebody just sang and you just got to sit during Godskin or something like that.
It's
So,
like, hey, Lynn, can we sit down for a moment?
right, exactly, exactly. All right, so then, did you come right back as staff after that, or what was
No,
your,
I actually I didn't think staff was right for me, and so
okay,
I had prepared for university. Um, and then when I was done with my Up with People student year, I went right to university to study music education at the University
okay,
of Oklahoma
okay,
with an emphasis on vocal and instrumental.
okay,
Um, and Had a lot of musical extracurriculars. I marched in marching band. I played in a Dixieland band. I sang in a
oh,
barbershop quartet. I did musical theater. I kept as busy as I could.
yeah,
Even played in a rock band for a while.
oh, fun,
So I did that. I did that for 4 years. And when I was done, I wasn't quite ready to be a public school teacher because I had just done student teaching, and Oklahoma was very conservative the way they treat teachers. And so um, I wasn't ready to settle into a career and be Mr. Bowerman. They didn't like students to call you by your first name.
Right, right.
So I wasn't prepared to be Mr. Bowerman for the rest of my life and lock into that. So I looked for some other options. And so I thought about Up with People. And so I wrote to Bill Welsh and said, hey, do you guys have anything open? And so they did. And so a cast was coming back to Missouri, but I was in Oklahoma. So I came home for the weekend and interviewed with a cast to be on staff.
Okay.
So met one of my best friends I ever made on staff, Ellen Moravec, interviewed me.
Okay.
And then I interviewed officially with Michael Knowles after that. And
Oh.
so two people are very important to me.
That's
So so I ended up coming back that next year.
And what was that, like 86 or something like that?
86, 86. Yep.
Okay.
And so I came back and traveled in cast A 86. And I traveled in the position at the time, you know, some positions change all the time.
Yeah.
The position was called music manager. And so I
Okay.
oversaw all the vocals and the band.
Okay. Okay.
And it was a great experience for me. I had a great production staff that I worked in conjunction with. It really it gave me a chance to really grow a lot.
Yeah.
I had grown a lot in university and learned some skills that Up with People student year had taught me. And my university years had taught me some skills that I could now use back in Up with People.
Yeah.
So I decided to stay on another year. So then I traveled again in 87.
Okay.
In cast B 87 and had an even more successful year. I was getting better at my job. It takes a while to learn. Even though you come back on staff, sometimes those first year staff members are not that much more knowledgeable than the students. And so
they could be younger than some of the students. That's
absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just because your name tag says music manager, that gives you some authority. So so I did 2 years on staff, but after that, that was it for me. I was tired of living out my suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a bit emotionally exhaustive to be on production staff because you have to tell your friends no quite often.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the education person or the promotion person doesn't have to do that. Very rarely do they have to tell their friends no. Yeah. And as a production staff, you do that every show day, that there's somebody's grandmother is coming to the show. Can they please sing? Can I sing? Can we sing a song apiece? Can I please sing that? And you have to tell them no. And it becomes a very emotional thing, especially when their friends approach you at dinner and tell you that you're stupid and you don't care. And 2 years of suitcases and emotional abuse was, I had done
enough.
And so I decided that was it for me. And I had to tell some friends that I should have traveled with on staff with for another year that I wasn't returning.
Yeah.
So that was hard, but it was the right decision for me. And so then I actually returned to school to get a second degree.
Okay.
And so I returned to Oklahoma to go back to school with now a new set of skills I didn't have when I was there the last time. So it was different the second time, but I enjoyed it. And some things were the same, some things were different. And but I still had my finger on the pulse of Up with People, and I still got my little fix because Bill Welsh asked me if I would come back in the summers for staging and just teach. Back then we had a huge staff that it took to get, because we had three casts all at one time. So you had so many bodies in staging. Yeah. So there was a lot of people that just came for the summer that didn't travel to teach. And so
that's what I did with costumes, Mike. I worked, 3 summers for costumes.
I did it with cast vocals. So I would come starting the summer of 88 right after I got off the road, and I taught vocals every summer, not in the Januaries because I was in school, I was at school, but
Okay.
I came back every summer from 88 through the early 90s and taught cast vocals. And
Okay.
it was great. I loved it.
Nice. All right. So now I want to fast forward to when I started hearing your name because of my son. Okay. Because there's still a bunch more years in there, right? And clearly we leave Tucson, they moved to Denver, and times are a changing, right? What's that song? That song, Times They Are a Changing, right? And and so by the time Caleb traveled, first of all, I was 18. It's interesting to hear your staff perspective, because whenever I'm with Tim Lane, we talk about this and we kind of laugh about it because it's the same dynamic that we always had. We're just older now, right? And and so for me, as an 18-year-old, literally, I turned 18 June 28th and I left July 6th. So, and Caleb was 26, which nobody believed because he behaves like he's 12. But there's there's that piece. And so by then, you were like writing songs and working with Eric, and I really don't know when any of that kind of started happening. So how did that coming back thing occur for you?
Well, I worked every staging um, through the early 90s, including the move to Denver. So I
Okay.
ended up moving to Denver.
Okay.
So I actually moved to Denver.
All right.
So um, living in Denver, still teaching summers. And then Reed Thompson got tired of me asking for a job because I felt I'd put in so many years
Give me a
that
job.
they needed help in the office. I would work in the office for Bill, for Herb, and Marshall Cartledge.
Yeah.
I was doing lots of things, and I felt that I really wanted to work as my full-time job, just not as a part-time thing every
Right.
summer. So they moved to Tucson, or they moved to Denver in 93. And so I moved to Denver. And so I kept on Reed and pushing for a job. So finally, in the summer of 94, they acquiesced and finally offered me a position. It was a very bittersweet, it was a bittersweet job offer because I was taking over for one of my best friends that I had when I had traveled on staff, who
Wow.
was working in the office. And there
Wow.
was a changing of the guard for the office. And so Scott Appleton was working in the office and decided to move on. And I took over his job. And
Okay.
so that was bittersweet for me because he was no longer working for Up With People because he was excellent at his job, but it was giving me my chance to do what I wanted to do for many years. So the
Wow.
summer of 94, I started working in the office, primarily Up With People in the early 90s, moved into electronic music assisting. So
That's when
MIDI
I feel old then. Yeah. Okay.
MIDI MIDI is a language that computers and synthesizers use.
Right.
So I was basically the MIDI manager for Up With People, as the casts went out and had these programs that would run the instrumental tracks that were played by the synthesizers, not by people. We had people that were playing different parts, but some parts were played by instruments. That was almost a full-time managed job. So I wasn't writing music yet. I was just working with computers, and then I was teaching the bands every summer. So I migrated from teaching vocals to teaching bands. It's
Okay.
a completely different feeling when you work with the cast. 90% of the cast has never sang before. Everyone in the band has played their instrument
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
a
That's a
long
good
time,
point.
and so it's a very different feeling teaching the bands than it is teaching the cast.
Yeah.
So but I still enjoyed it very much, and it set me on the path of doing other things.
So Michael, when you just said that, the 90% thing, that's so interesting to me because I never was a person that knew some of those percentages about who came to Up With People, what their skill set were, what the percentages were. And part of these has been what drew you to even come here. So that one I did the other day with Kevin Moore and oh, I'm Fuzzy Norm and Mark that started playing together in the 80s, all were invited because of being musicians. All were asked to, and so just hearing that is just kind of an interesting thing because I like to sing. I sang now and then. I was like a
Yeah.
memorable tune person, not a, a lead singer by any, and had done community theater, but always just a thing to do, nothing, else. So it's a fascinating number to think about how many people didn't know how to sing or had
Yeah,
no
it's a completely the demographics when you have a cast, you're teaching a cast of over 100 and over 90% of them have not had any training in singing.
Wow.
They maybe like to sing, some hate to sing, so you
Yeah.
have to turn them into people who want to sing, and you have to take people who have very little skill at all and turn them into
Performers and
a
singers.
performer. And so it's a
Yeah.
different skill set than working with the band. It's a
Yeah.
completely different temperament.
That's fascinating to think about. So as the years go by and the show evolves and the casts change, and so were you there then when everything shut down? Like, were you working there during
Yes.
COVID and
Yeah.
so the
Well,
cast?
well,
Okay,
when you say shut down, we actually shut down in 2000 first.
that's right. Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that.
I
Oh,
was, I was, I was literally the first person let go.
oh my.
So
Yeah, that feels
I
so
did a
long
support
ago
trip.
now. Oh,
I did a support trip to visit a cast in Canada,
okay.
returned
And didn't have a job?
and didn't have a job. And so I got about a month head start on everybody. The company was still going.
Yeah.
So, but they eliminated my position,
Wow.
and then I got about a month head start. That was in November, and so in December they shut the company down.
Interesting. Yeah.
So yeah,
All right. So I'm gonna, because we're talking writing and music and all of that. One of the things that I always joke about, or our cast always talks about, is how everything has backing tracks at reunions, right? So we all go and we do the same 3 songs that we've done, forever and ever, whatever they are. So for us, it's Roads, and for the cast before us, it's Roads, and whatever, they combine us all together. And I said, I think there needs to be a whole night of the miscellaneous, they didn't really make it songs like Hey Y'all, Throw Me the Ball, or Give the Jukebox a Kick, or whatever, all these fun ones where there was just stupid jokes that people told with them. Just and everybody's like, okay, yeah, Donna, that Tim Lane, he's like, oh, right, whatever.
it's funny for like 5 people.
I know. I know. Me, I have a work sense of humor, I suppose. But and so from what I understand, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong with this, Mike, did you write I'm Your Son?
Yes.
I and I know that you were around and you know this, that when Caleb was learning it, he was learning it from John Lanham, and they both had lost their fathers,
Mhm.
and both were one of 3 boys, the youngest of 3 boys. They had, and Sam and Steph both traveled with me. I was at the first show where he sang that emotional song.
Yeah.
Emotional
And you know
song.
what? Going back to what I said earlier, for almost all of staging, I had to tell Caleb no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
and
he had never sung before up with people. He did the little kid part in Gary, Indiana, whatever.
yeah, he and I sat down at lunch one day and had a real heart to heart. I said, Caleb, I know that this song means more to you than almost everyone else in the cast, but there's a level that you have to get to that you're not at yet.
Mhm.
And so John and I spoke about a plan to get him to a place. So I actually never heard Caleb sing the song. Um,
Interesting.
so, um, but going back to telling people no, it's a hard part of the job.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
know, when it first came out of my mouth, and he and I were sitting down at lunch, you know, I saw his shoulders slump,
Yeah.
and the light go out of his eyes, like,
Yeah.
and and I'm trying to keep a strong face as well, trying to do
Right.
my job, and giving him constructive feedback, not just you're not doing this right
Right.
or
Right.
that, but here are the things that you need to accomplish to get you over the next hurdle that then gets you prepared to conquer the next hurdle, because there are steps.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was always very happy that he was able to continue down the path and
Yeah.
proceed and improve enough to be able to perform it in the show.
Yeah. Yeah. He, I know you just saw School of Rock, and it's funny because he's such a type, and this is something that I never understood years ago or whatever, but he's never going to be Jean Valjean, right? That's not his person, in my opinion. Um, but the rock and roll kind of things. The other day he was practicing something from Jesus Christ Superstar, and I was laughing because I started hearing bum 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 bum. I know, and I know what it is, but of my children, when he joined up with people, we had a fundraiser and all three of my kids performed. And I remember Phil Wooster leaving and saying, the eldest is by far the most talented right away. Adam is a great songwriter, storyteller, and Caleb needs work. And it was the first time that Caleb had ever played anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to hear you
Well,
say that,
with people is such a great place
to learn
to
and grow.
try to get better, because if you fail, it's a soft landing spot.
Yeah, yeah,
And so in the real world, the landing spots are never that soft. So it's a great place to try and fail
yep,
and learn from your mistakes,
yep,
move to the next challenge, conquer it, maybe with some fails,
yeah,
move on to the next one, and then get into the real world. And then not only then are you fix some things, but you've learned the ability to fix yourself. And
yeah,
learning how to learn is an important skill that you learn up with people,
yeah,
that we
yeah,
we preached all the time in the production department. You have to teach them how to learn.
yeah.
And it's an important skill to pass on, that all of our staffs that we
Yeah.
work with, we worked very hard to do.
It that also is interesting verbiage, Mike, because even this, I am extremely extemporaneous. I have a plan, I stick to it or I don't. I make mistakes. Um but I care, and I care what I'm hearing, and I care about the stories. And would I ever make it on national TV? Yeah, probably not, because I probably would not follow some rule that I'm supposed to follow or do. But it's been an interesting journey, for me. And whenever I just did a video for my website, and he said, "Do you want it to be about Donna Reed, or do you want it to be about Donna Reed selling houses?" And I thought that was a fascinating question, because am I selling the fact that I can sell a house, or am I selling me? And that created a whole difference in what I was, putting together. So kind of all right. So where was your favorite place to ever travel, Mike?
Oh, that's a really hard one. Favorite place?
Or one or two places, whatever.
Well, um, I guess favorite would be the first time I left the United States, because I was raised in a small Midwestern town with parents that weren't really international based. So leaving the country for the first time
Yeah.
was extraordinarily life changing. So my first place out of the country was Helsinki, Finland.
Well, I haven't
So
been, and I've heard it's a great place. So what a great first place to
it's
go.
so um so my student year cast went to Scandinavia
Mm,
first, and so we spent months in Finland, Sweden, Norway. And
nice.
so um it was life changing for me, experiential. The first place that I ever went that was like touristy wow
Yeah.
was my student year. We left from Tucson, and I love the fact I was sad. I was sad for future Up With People students when Up With People left Tucson, because Tucson's not a tourist place per se. When Europeans come to the States, they go, we're going to Florida, we're going to New York, we're going to California.
Yep.
That's never Tucson. When Missourians go on vacation, they go to Disney World or
Yeah.
Texas. So Tucson is never on anyone's list like that at first shot, but it's such a great experience to go to the desert, and it's such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Even in the summer when it's like 120 and you didn't know the temperature could ever get that hot.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah.
I love that. But when we left Tucson, we were mostly in parts of New Mexico and Arizona that were kind of barren.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we did a big tour of Colorado, and I'd never been in Colorado before, and that was great. But the first time my jaw dropped is when we went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Oh, Jackson's beautiful.
I had never seen mountains like that, even in a
No.
book before,
Right.
even in a book.
Right.
So to be able to sit there and look at the Tetons like that was
Yeah.
a memorable thing for me.
We spent
So
Thanksgiving there our year, and I'm, farm town in Ohio, same thing. It was,
yeah,
yeah, it was fascinating. And, Hugh and Donna Sost ended up with a house down here south of
Mhm.
town. And so it was always kind of fun for me to see them now and then. All right, I'm going to ask you something, and this is really random. Do you have a dog that's running behind you up and down the stairs?
and
It's
so
Michael,
she,
it's
she's
blurry, but I'm like, there's something going on.
she's very selfish of my time, and the fact that I'm doing something with somebody else is, so she's trying to get my attention. I've ignored her for most of the call.
It's been so funny because it's been a couple of times. The first time, so it's, like when you're watching a movie and then they show you later that there's some like kid behind the curtain that does something weird. It's been like, it's like, okay, I think there was movement behind him. That's so funny. Too funny.
She's trying to be involved.
Yeah, yeah. All right, we only have a couple more minutes. You've said a lot in this that to me already feeds into what is often my final question about how and why would you encourage future people to travel, because you've shared a lot about the learning and the growth and everything that happens. Is there, the program is entirely different, right? They're doing different things. They're getting ready to go to India, which fascinates me. What might you say to an 18-year-old about why this might be better than couch surfing somewhere, or, whatever that might be?
Well, off the bat, the first thing that I would say is one of my little catchphrases that I've always had over the years, that I said Up With People would be an amazing experience if all they did was show up in Tucson and just every day come in and sit and talk.
Oh,
So you don't have to go anywhere. The going place is cool, but from a growth standpoint, you don't have to go anywhere. Just to come in. Again, a kid from a small town in Missouri. I had only met one person from outside the United States before I arrived in Up With People, and that was a German violin player who was an exchange student at my high school. And she never ever said a word. I never spoke to her. So
you just met her.
I met her. So I
Wow.
always used to say that we could just show up and sit in Denver or Tucson for months and just talk to each other and learn about how people grew up.
Yeah.
And how people
awesome.
look at politics differently, and dating and school and sports and everything that make our lives what they are.
And how they look at them the same or different, right? That's the piece of me when I had somebody tell me, well, I read about it in a book. I don't need to go there. And I can't even wrap my brain around that mindset, because to me, it's the going that makes you realize we're all the same.
Yeah.
Right? We're
And the going part, learning is one thing. Book learning is only so emotional.
Yeah,
You can say, well, I learned everything I need to get from a book.
yeah.
But when you physically walk through the gate at Auschwitz,
Mm-hmm.
no book can do that. No book,
Exactly.
no book.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you have a tour from a gentleman who was there as a child, no book
We'll do
or
that.
no school book. Maybe a novel could get, but
Mhm.
it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I would argue that book thing,
Yeah.
because there's certain things that you go to,
Yeah.
like concentration camps and Notre Dame,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
and
I totally agree with that. I stepping into the world. I was in Nuremberg, and I gotta wrap this up. I was in Nuremberg last year, and our guide was showing us the field where Hitler spoke. And it, it's this weird sensation, right? Of the history that occurred there that you cannot get anywhere else. So, all right. Well, thank you for your time today. I greatly
no,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
It's been great chatting with you, and I'll let you know when I upload it. And please share with your friends. That seems to be the way that it's getting out there, for other people to listen. And I am so grateful that some of these stories are we all have a story, right? And I
Absolutely,
just
absolutely. It's fun, and that's why it's fun to hear other people's stories, because moments of them are exactly the same, and moments of them can
never be. Yeah.
never be the same for someone, because of the people you were with
Yeah.
and possibly where you were at when you did it.
Yeah.
And
Agree.
so
Agree.
um
All
I've
right.
been very lucky to have over 25 years spent up with people,
That's very cool.
and it changed my life for the better.
That's awesome.
And I hope thousands of young people around the world continue to get the opportunity, and I
Thank you.
wish them the best.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Donna.